unexpectedly pregnant with the child of my sworn enemy's family. I was soft-hearted for a moment, and decided to keep the child. At the child's full moon banquet, the guests all marveled. The little princess's green eyes are somewhat similar to young Master Fu's of the Fu family. I was extremely panicked inside and casually made up an excuse. The child's father is of mixed blood. Unexpectedly, the child's father was right at the scene and was staring at his child, and me dangerously. Today is my daughter's full moon banquet. More than half of the wealthy families in the entire Zhongcheng city have come to the Zhu family to offer their congratulations. I stood in the bedroom, looking at my daughter in my arms, feeling extremely tender in my heart. Her pink face and fair skin look exactly like me in every way. Unfortunately, like her father, she has a pair of green eyes. Fortunately, a newborn baby is still very sleepy and doesn't like to open her eyes very much. After making sure that she was asleep and wouldn't open her eyes, I happily carried her downstairs. As soon as I went downstairs, the guests who came to offer their congratulations all turned their gazes on me. Several families that were on good terms with the Zhu family came forward and stared intently at the child in my arms. Look at those thick eyebrows and big eyes. That nose and mouth. They are exactly the same as young Miss Zhu. She really takes after the advantages of the Zhu family. The little princess has the bearing of the Zhu family as soon as she is born. Old Master Zhu has someone to carry on his legacy. My grandfather was quite proud, of course. Born by my granddaughter. Can she not be excellent? Unlike the Fu family, in this generation, there isn't even a trace of a child yet. They deserve to have a thin offspring. Hearing the word Fu family, I hugged my child tightly out of guilt and secretly groaned. Grandpa, you are talking about the biological father of your great-granddaughter. However, I dare not let Grandpa know about this. After all, the Zhu family and the Fu family are sworn enemies. Counting it up, my daughter is currently the only bloodline of the Fu family in this generation, the kind that is passed down alone, because of the feud between our great-grandfather. The feud between the Zhu family and the Fu family has continued until now. The relationship is even more like water and fire. If Grandpa knew that the child I gave birth to was from the Fu family, then what would happen? To avoid being exposed, I quickly changed the topic. Grandpa, children have weak resistance. I'd better take in and back to the room to rest first. After all, the longer she stays outside, the greater the risk of being exposed. I'm not sure what my grandfather will do to me, this unfilial descendant, after he knows the truth. But my mouth is like a fort alert. As soon as Grandpa said okay, a deafening cry resounded through the sky. Wah! The baby is awake. Damn. My mouth is so unlucky. The good things don't come true, but the bad things do. I hurriedly tried to soothe the child. But the more I soothed her, the more energetic my daughter became. Her crying was so loud that everyone at the banquet could hear it. The scene was once out of control. At this moment, there was a commotion in the crowd. Oh, the little princess actually has a pair of green pupils. Really? I don't know if it's my eyes playing tricks. A little princess's green pupils are somewhat similar to young Master Fu's of the Fu family. There were waves of doubts coming from the crowd. Even Grandpa asked a puzzled look. It's over. Grandpa has never seen my daughter with her eyes open, so he didn't know that Enanon has a pair of green pupils. I covered my daughter's eyes guiltily and, for some reason, my brain went crazy, and I directly made up an excuse. The child's father is of mixed blood. Fortunately, I'm smart. If it was revealed that I was pregnant with the child of my sworn enemy's family, my great-grandfather could crawl out of his coffin in anger. It's really a matter of life and death. Carmelo, you are capable. When did you change your taste? How come I don't know? Just when I was secretly congratulating myself, a voice suddenly came from afar, full of gritted teeth. My heart skipped a beat and I took a few steps back guiltily. Mauricio? Why is this guy here? Could he know that the child is his? Impossible. I clearly sneaked away that night. He shouldn't be able to find out. The gathered crowd suddenly dispersed. Mauricio stood in the crowd, full of hostility. He was staring dangerously at the child in my arms. And me. Those cold green eyes were exactly the same as my daughter's. I swallowed and stood still, holding the child and not daring to move. But for some reason, I suddenly remembered that night a year ago. He was just as dangerous and sharp back then. But in the end, he obediently let me take advantage of him. He wasn't like this back then. Just when I was lost in thought, Mauricio had already walked up to me, wearing a black suit. He was aloof and indifferent, with no expression on his face. His thinner Feng eyes were lowered, staring intently at the child in my arms. Being stared at like this, I was extremely panicked inside. What should I do? The child's father has actually come to the door himself. Fortunately, Grandpa stood in front of me and knocked hard on his cane, his tone full of dissatisfaction. Young man of the Fu family, what are you doing here? The Shu family didn't invite you. Regarding the Fu family, Grandpa completely inherited the teachings of our great-grandfather, and has never had a good expression. Taking this opportunity, I guiltily hurried upstairs. Who would have thought that Mauricio was even faster than me? He stood in front of me and blocked my way. His green eyes became even colder. Carmelo, the child's father. Before he could finish speaking, my daughter started crying again at the top of her lungs. This time, she cried even more heart-wrenchingly than before. Not caring to reply, I quickly comforted my daughter. But for some reason, my daughter still wouldn't stop crying and even kept struggling. Until a voice came from above. Let me hold her. It was Mauricio. I don't know if it was because of the blood connection between father and daughter. As soon as my daughter came into contact with Mauricio, her crying stopped abruptly. She even blinked her green eyes that were exactly the same as his and looked at him curiously. Me. It's over. The baby likes her father. Mauricio, who was holding Enon, stood still without moving. It was so quiet that it was terrifying. The atmosphere was a bit off. I sensed a bit of uneasiness. Just as I was about to take my daughter back, Mauricio took a step back. He narrowed his green pupils, his gaze resting on my daughter's eyes, and then slowly looked up. His tone was extremely slow and sharp. Carmelo, whose child do you say this is? My scalp tingled. I avoided his probing gaze guiltily. I couldn't help muttering in my heart. His eyes are so good. He could tell at a glance that Enon is his daughter. It's not written like this in novels. In the novel, the female lead runs away with a child. The child is already 4 or 5 years old. And the male lead still doesn't recognize that the child is his at a glance. He knew just by looking at her. His eyes are so good. That night, he was still rolling around with me. If it weren't for the fact that our two families are sworn enemies, those who don't know might think that he has a crush on me. Mauricio, what are you doing here? This is my daughter's full moon banquet. Give Enon back to me quickly. I reached out to take my daughter back. Mauricio raised his eyebrows, and suddenly leaned forward to look at me. The distance was extremely close. I could even smell the faint cedar scent on his body. Just like that night. It surrounded me from behind, soaked me in it, and then slowly caressed and lingered on the back of my neck. An uncontrollable numbness spread from my tailbone. I choked. Carmelo. Carmelo. You are so useless. Is this the time to think about this? Enon is still in Mauricio's hands. Mauricio's expression became even more mysterious, making me uneasy. But surprisingly, he actually gave my daughter back to me. And he used a voice that only the two of us could hear. Carmelo. The child is mine, right? That night, I knew it was you. What happened that night with Mauricio was purely an accident. Although the Chu family and the Fu family are sworn enemies, Mauricio and I grew up together. It's all because of the competitiveness of our elders. They always want to compare and compete between us. So, every time we meet, It becomes a comparison between our elders. Mauricio's parents are still okay, and don't particularly resent the Zhu family. Only my grandpa and Mauricio's grandpa firmly remember the family teachings and have always been displeased with each other. Under the subtle influence, Mauricio and I gradually grew distant. The accident happened because of a drinking party. Everyone in Zhongcheng City knows that the Zhu and Fu families are at odds. So usually at banquets, we are not arranged to sit at the same table. But that day was a coincidence. Mauricio and I were arranged to sit together. I reasonably suspect that the organizers had the intention of causing trouble. They really love to watch the excitement and don't think it's a big deal. At the banquet, we ignored each other. Even when toasting, we were still in opposition. So, the situation became that we kept pouring drinks for each other one cup after another. In the end, somehow, we ended up rolling together. The next day when I woke up, my waist and back ached. I inadvertently caught sight of Mauricio beside me. He was lying quietly by my side, his eyes closed, and his palms still on my waist. Full of possessiveness. My brain froze for a few seconds. I closed my eyes and opened them again. 1,000 possibilities flashed through my mind. But I never thought that I would actually sleep with my sworn enemy. Damn. How did it happen last night? I racked my brain but couldn't figure it out. I had to focus my attention on Mauricio again. Gulp. He's really in good shape. I swallowed and, as if possessed, reached out and touched his abdominal muscles. It feels so good. I didn't expect that Mauricio, who seemed thin and cold on the surface, was actually so well built in private. But unfortunately, who let him be the sworn enemy of our family? So, I sneaked away and even erased all traces of that night. How does he still remember and know that it was me that night? What are you talking about? I don't understand. I took a few steps back and pretended not to understand what he said. Then I turned and went upstairs. But he replied sinister lie from behind me. Don't admit it? It doesn't matter. I can be a stepfather too. Young Master Fu of the Fu family takes the initiative to be a stepfather. The next day, the hot search exploded. This topic firmly occupied the top spot, overwhelming other hot events. Netizens who were eating melons were all in an uproar and speculating about Mauricio's motives for doing this. Guess the unspeakable things between me and my sworn enemy back then. After my sworn enemy got pregnant, I became the stepfather of her child. What stepfather? That's the biological father. I silently knelt on the ground and listened to Grandpa read out the netizens' comments through gritted teeth. I have to say, this group of netizens are always at the forefront of eating melons. Carmelo. Grandpa suddenly called my full name. I subconsciously straightened up. Here. Tell me. Who exactly is Un's biological father? Who else could it be? It's Mauricio's. Of course. I dare not say this out loud. Grandpa. Didn't I say it? Anon's father is a mixed-race person. I'm not lying either. That guy Mauricio has 1/8 for blood. He is also mixed race. I swear to you that I am definitely not lying about this point. Otherwise let the child's father. Before I could finish speaking, a faint male voice suddenly came from the door. Otherwise, what will happen to the child's father? I looked up abruptly and saw Mauricio and his grandfather standing at the door, looking at me with amusement, their eyebrows and eyes full of teasing. It's over. I swore on the person himself. I shut up and, like a quail, silently lowered my head even more. If I am guilty, let the law punish me instead of letting my sworn enemy watch my joke in person. Woo woo woo. It's really embarrassing. If there was a hole, I really wish I could immediately crawl into it. Seeing me like this, Grandpa angrily knocked on his cane several times, looking at the door with displeasure. Old Fu, what are you doing here? As for why the relationship between the Fu family and the Zhu family has always been bad, in addition to the feud between our great-grandfather S, the rest is all due to my grandpa Ontario's grandpa. It is said that it was because the person my grandpa, I didn't like him but liked Mauricio's grandpa instead. So he has held a grudge until now. Fortunately, he later met my grandma. But they still didn't like each other. This matter has never passed. And then it continued to our generation. Mauricio and I are the most outstanding heirs of our families in this generation. But since the two old men have nothing else to compare, they put their goals on us and are determined to let us compete. Over time, even the best relationship when we were young will fade. By the time we took over the company as adults, Mauricio and I had almost no contact. When we met at work usually, we also ignored each other. Who would have thought that not only did an accident happen, but I was also pregnant with his child? Of course I came to congratulate. Grandpa Fu guiltily stroked his beard. When he said this, his eyes were wandering. My heart suddenly cooled by half. Grandpa Fu would never talk to Grandpa like this. Then there is only one possibility. He knows that Enanon is Mauricio's child. It's over. Now it's completely over. I definitely can't keep my life. Old brother Zhu, can you let me see your little princess? Anyway, it won't be long before He Jing comes to be a stepfather. Let me see first. It should be okay, right? Grandpa Fu was extremely eager. It made me look confused. Huh? Stepfather? Didn't Mauricio tell Grandpa Fu the truth? I secretly glanced at Mauricio and found that he was also looking at me. At the moment our eyes met, I held my breath. I couldn't bear his unobstructed aggressive gaze. What's going on? Why is his gaze at me so strange? Wait. Could he really have a crush on me? I quickly lowered my head and racked my brain to try to find evidence that he liked me. But I couldn't find any at all. I comforted myself. This is impossible. It must be because of Enanon. It must be. Hearing Grandpa Fu's words, Grandpa was very surprised. He blurted out, "Are you crazy?" Seeming to find it extremely unbelievable. Grandpa's suspicious gaze fell on Mauricio again. Why is your family so eager to be a father? Could Grandpa Fu be so generous? I guiltily moved back again. Although I don't know why Grandpa Fu is acting with Mauricio, there is no doubt that he knows the truth. But Grandpa's next words almost choked me to death. Old Fu, could it be that your kid is infertile? So you want to find my Carmelo as a cover? Grandpa suddenly raised his voice. This shocking statement made all of us fall silent at the same time. If Mauricio was infertile, where did my child come from? No wonder it was so strange. Grandpa became more and more excited as he spoke. No wonder your He Jing has been so ascetic these years. I originally thought he was keeping himself clean. Who knew he was actually impotent? It seems that your old Fu family won't have a great-granddaughter to hold. Grandpa has no other hobbies except watching Grandpa Fu being frustrated. After I was found to be pregnant, Grandpa immediately called Grandpa Fu to show off. His words were full of smugness. After all, Maricel and I are both the only children in our families. Both families are looking forward to us getting married and having children so that we can enjoy our old age. But we are both unromantic and, when it comes to marriage, we wish to stay away as far as possible. So, our marriage has always been a headache for them. However, my sudden pregnancy gave Grandpa something to show off. To make sure everything was safe, I specifically told Grandpa that Enanon was born to me after I bought a sperm abroad. I even changed the pregnancy time, and didn't dare to go home for a whole year. After giving birth to Enanon abroad, I returned to the country and held Enanon's full moon banquet. Who knew Mauricio's eyes were so good? I muttered to myself secretly. Suddenly, Mauricio, who hadn't spoken all this time, suddenly spoke. He smiled and his tone was gentle. Grandpa Zhu, my grandpa can't wait for me to be Enanon's father. Am I right, Grandpa? As soon as the words fell, Grandpa Fu couldn't wait to rush up and firmly hold Grandpa's hand. Old brother Zhu, as long as you let me see little Enanon, don't say let He Jing be a stepfather. Even if he marries into your family, I will agree. I was completely stunned. Is Grandpa Fu so desperate? When En and An was finally held in Grandpa Fu's arms and looking at the big and small, old and young people with exactly the same green pupils, Grandpa completely understood. Looking at me with gritted teeth, didn't you say that En and An's biological father is a mixed-race person? These identical eyes. Are you telling me that the child's father is a mixed-race person? Seeing Grandpa so angry, I weakly argued, isn't Mauricio a mixed-race person? I didn't lie. Grandpa was immediately choked and couldn't say a word. He could only angrily keep knocking on his cane. One day, your great-grandfather will be so angry that he will crawl out of his coffin because of you. I didn't refute. If great-grandfather is so angry that he crawls out of his coffin, then Mauricio's great-grandfather will also have to crawl out, right? At that time, it's hard to say who will deal with whom. After knowing the truth, Grandpa looked at Grandpa Fu even more unpleasantly, especially when Grandpa Fu was still holding in Nen and smiling happily. Oh, my precious Sen and An. So cute. Old Fu. This is my great-granddaughter. Grandpa refused to be outdone. That's also my great-granddaughter. What's yours? En and An is the blood of my Shu family. It's also of the Fu family. The Shu families. The Fu families. Good you. Old Fu. Your family has a thin offspring. So you are aiming at En and An? I tell you. Don't even think about it. What do you mean I am aiming at her? En and An is also of Fu family blood. She is a member of the Fu family. You want my great-granddaughter to have a connection with the Fu family? No way. You. Old Shu. You are being unreasonable. Just when my grandpa and them were arguing endlessly, I had already been taken to the next room by Mauricio. As soon as he closed the door, he pushed me against the door. His eyes were restrained but gloomy and pressing. Carmelo, why did you block me? I have been looking for you. After having a drunken one-night stand, I was constantly on edge at home, afraid that Mauricio would come to the door. So I directly blocked him and cut off all news about him. After being found to be pregnant, my first reaction was to abort her. But because I was soft-hearted, I kept her. After arranging everything, I resolutely went abroad. Even Grandpa didn't know my exact location. But he has actually been looking for me? I awkwardly turned my head aside. What are you looking for me for? Could it be that you want to take revenge on me? I just slept with him once and got pregnant. It's not necessary to pursue me so relentlessly. Right? Is he so petty? Looking for you, of course, is to make you take responsibility. Mauricio said the most unbelievable thing in the calmest tone. Take responsibility? He wants me to take responsibility? Didn't I hear wrong? How do you know that it was me that night? I clearly sent someone to erase all traces. How did he find out? Carmelo. I was drunk. Not stupid. And that night, it was you who took the initiative first. Do you need me to help you remember? Mauricio's voice was steady, and there was no abnormality. But his big palm suddenly grabbed my hand and placed it on his shirt. The green eyes were filled with complex emotions, surging thickly. After you got drunk, I sent you to the hotel. As soon as the door closed, you were like this. He suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled hard. With a ripping sound, he tore my clothes. Looking at the faintly exposed spring scenery, I was a bit stunned. Was I so violent? The matter is not over yet. Mauricio pulled my hand in again. My old face flushed and I felt a bit embarrassed. This is not necessary. Mauricio didn't speak, but his eyes looking at me were a bit cold. I immediately let him do whatever he wanted like a deflated balloon. You touched my upper body all over. You still weren't satisfied. You even bit my Adam's apple. A cough cough. I still have an impression of this scene. I became yours. Naturally. You have to be responsible for me. After saying that, Mauricio withdrew his hand and slowly tittied up the broken cloth strips on his chest. Moreover, you ran away with my child. Speaking of this, Mauricio seemed a bit angry. There was even a hint of anger in his tone. Blocking me, abandoning me, and even hiding the existence of the child. God knows how angry he was when he learned that the first thing she did after returning to the country was to hold the child's full moon banquet. He even thought about really being a stepfather to her child. The more Mauricio talked, the more guilty I became. That's not something I can control. Who let our two families be sworn enemies? Pregnant with the child of the sworn enemy's family. If Grandpa knew about it, he would definitely skin me. And you also hate me, right? In my heart, I always felt that Mauricio didn't like me. This thought came after high school. I met Mauricio for the first time when I was 5 years old. Grandpa took me to a banquet and ran into Grandpa and Mauricio, who also came to the banquet. As soon as the two met, they didn't like each other. They started to taunt each other in front of us. They even stretched their necks to compare who was better between me and Mauricio. Although I had never met Mauricio before, Grandpa kept mentioning his name in my ear every day. It was hard for me not to remember. So I secretly hid behind Grandpa and observed Mauricio. He was a few months older than me. He stood quietly beside and listened to the two old men arguing. There was no expression on his face until he noticed me hiding behind Grandpa. We stared at each other for a long time. Without being noticed by the two old men, he took my hand and secretly left. We went to a poolside in the banquet hall. After making sure no one was chasing us, he breathed a sigh of relief and sat down with me. Phew, finally escaped. Are you Carmelo? He propped up his cool little face and looked at me sideways. I was a bit surprised that he actually knew my name, but I still nodded. Grandpa keeps saying your name in my ear every day. So this is what you look like. He seemed very curious about me and looked at me over and over again. My grandpa also often mentions your name. He said you are very excellent and the most outstanding person of the Fu family in this generation. But he was really good looking. Fair and tender. It made people want to pinch him. But I didn't dare to do it. I just sat properly. Neither of us expected that our grandpas were like this. I also heard Grandpa say that our two families are sworn enemies. What is a sworn enemy? At that time, I didn't understand what it meant. Mauricio kindly explained it to me. A sworn enemy means we are in an adversarial relationship. I immediately widened my eyes. Then you are my sworn enemy? 5-year-old Mauricio seemed to think it was not right. He shook his head and then nodded. I was even more confused. So are we sworn enemies or not? Our grandpas are sworn enemies. But we are not. He thought for a long time before coming up with such an answer. To be honest, he was very good looking. I didn't want to be sworn enemies with him. If not sworn enemies, then we are friends. Then you are my friend. I was so excited that I directly kissed him on the face. The teacher said that if you like someone, you should kiss them. 5-year-old Mauricio's face flushed instantly. He stammered and said that I couldn't kiss him. I was very confused. Isn't kissing when you like someone? Unfortunately, at that time, our grandpas sent people to look for us. So we had to leave secretly. Later, although the relationship between our grandpas was still as intense as fire and water, we were actually very good friends in private. He also seriously told me that good friends can't kiss casually. It was like this and everything was peaceful until high school. People outside thought that Mauricio and I were sworn enemies and had to compete in everything. But in private, we would help each other. As they grew older, the relationship between Grandpa and them was not as tense as before. Sometimes they could even talk calmly for a while. Of course, arguments were still inevitable. Until I overheard the conversation between Mauricio and his buddy. Mauricio's buddy knew the feud between our two families. So when talking to him, he didn't hide anything at all. Competing in elementary school, competing in junior high school, and still competing in high school. Were you going to compete for a lifetime? Although Mauricio and I were friends in private, we were also competitors at the same time, having competed for so many years. Aren't you tired? It was normal for Mauricio's buddy to think like this. After all, Constantly competing is unbearable for anyone. Tired. But Mauricio's answer completely pulled me into the abyss. So he was also tired. Right. On the surface, we were competing rivals. In private, we were friends who helped each other. Such a relationship had lasted for so many years. He was probably tired too. He should. Not like me. Perhaps all along. I was just being self-indulgent. Our two families were originally sworn enemies. No matter how hard we tried. This was an unchangeable fact. Since I already knew the result, it was better to nip the inappropriate thoughts in the bud as soon as possible. From that day on, I gradually distanced myself from Mauricio. Even though I knew it wasn't his fault. But I didn't want to continue anymore. You think I don't like you? Mauricio's whole mood seemed gloomy and oppressive. I smiled uncomfortably. What's past is past. Let's not mention it. Anyway, now by accident, I have his child. It's not in the past. Mauricio's tone was still very tough. He held my chin but didn't use much force, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were sharp and he said word by word. Carmelo, I like you. I have always liked you. Since our first meeting when I was 5 years old. My liking for you has increased every year. I know that there may be many obstacles due to our family's relationship. But I am not afraid. Because every heartbeat tells me that I must catch up with you. This is what my heart desires. It is also destined. I am tired of liking you but not being able to say it clearly. I am tired of pretending to be competitors with you every day. I am even more tired of the adversarial relationship between our two families. But I didn't have the ability to do everything back then. By the time he had the ability, she was avoiding him as if he were the plague. Carmelo, I like you. I like you so much that my whole heart is filled with you. Don't leave me alone. Okay? His tall body slowly bent down. Mauricio wrapped his arms around my waist and abdomen and leaned against my shoulder, whispering softly. For a moment, I didn't react and let him hold me. I blinked and still felt dizzy. Mauricio likes me? And has liked me for so long? In a trance. Something soaked my shoulder. Mauricio was in tears and whispered an apology to me again. I'm sorry. I should have confessed to you earlier. Can you not abandon me? Even if you really make me be a stepfather. I am willing. As long as you don't abandon me. This was the first time I had seen Mauricio look so cautious. Just as I was about to say something, the originally closed door was suddenly pushed open. Grandpa was holding my daughter. Grandpa Fu was standing beside him. He stared at Mauricio's torn clothes on his chest in surprise and then at our actions. I covered my lips and coughed. Quickly pushed Mauricio away and tried to prove my innocence. Grandpa, I am innocent. But in this way, the torn cloth on Mauricio's chest was even more obvious, coupled with the tears still on the corners of his eyes. Grandpa didn't believe me even more. He turned sideways and hurriedly pulled Grandpa Fu and left. Don't look at what's improper. Don't look at what's improper. Old Fu. Let's go quickly. Before leaving. He didn't forget to give my daughter back to me. Me. Well, this misunderstanding is even more impossible to explain. Mauricio, on the side, didn't care at all. Instead, he came closer and stared at enemy and in my arms. It had to be said that the blood relationship between father and daughter was irreplaceable. As soon as Enan saw Mauricio, she happily smiled. Can I hold her? When he said this, he was extremely cautious. I was soft-hearted for a moment and handed Enan to him. But looking at Mauricio's actions of holding the child, he was actually quite skilled. There should be no children in your generation in your family. Right? I hesitated and spoke. What my grandpa said about the Fu family having a thin offspring was not false. Because in this generation, there is indeed only Mauricio as the only descendant. Then why was he so skilled at holding a child? Mauricio looked down at his daughter. His tone was incredibly gentle. Knowing that you were back in the country to hold a full moon banquet. I specially went to a parenting institution to learn and be a stepfather. No. Is he serious? Suddenly, I had mixed feelings in my heart. The heat of the hot search remained high. Mauricio also stayed at my house and didn't leave. Netizens were all curious about who the biological father of my daughter was. They shouted on the internet one after another. They even wanted to see Mauricio's daily life as a daddy taking care of a baby. Helplessly, after getting Mauricio's consent, I took several videos and uploaded them online. In the video, Mauricio was holding his daughter in his arms, gently rocking her. There was a soothing tune in his mouth. The whole person exuded an extremely strong sense of a husband. The daughter also pursed her lips and smiled at him. Netizens collectively exploded. In my lifetime, I can actually see a male mom. Silently, unashamed saliva flowed from the corner of my mouth. Husband. This baby is so cute. It's simply going to melt my heart. Is there anyone who wants to form a group to steal her? So cute. Can I kiss her? Just a small kiss. A small one. Huh? You actually dared to show her off. I immediately give you a reaching out emoji. I am a college student. Give me the child. Thank you. So fragrant. So soft. So cute. Wow, you Aoshu. Give it to me. I need it. Let Auntie take a sip. Get out of the way. I am going to be her stepfather. To be honest, I am the child's father. Those upstairs are spouting nonsense. This baby is clearly mine. There were a group of people on the internet claiming to be the baby's parents. But there were also sharp-eyed netizens who noticed something was wrong. This is a stepfather? A biological father. Right? The pupil colors are exactly the same. No wonder he wants to be a stepfather. It turns out he is the biological father. The case is solved. My sworn enemy wants to be the stepfather of my child. In the end, it turns out to be the biological father. Single dogs outside the screen are hit with 10,000 points of critical strike. The internet was in an uproar. But Mauricio inappropriately posted a Weibo at this time. Mauricio v. The child is mine. The person is also mine. I have had a crush on her for many years and am currently chasing her. As soon as this news came out, Mauricio's Weibo was completely flooded. No way. You already have such a cute baby. And you are still telling me that you have to chase the baby's mother. You really don't leave us any way out. With a baby in the left hand and the baby's mother in the right hand. You really don't consider the lives of us single dogs. I think this is not a sworn enemy at all. It's a long-planned scheme. TSK. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I looked at Mauricio with a crazy expression. But he was very serious. I have already told Grandpa and them about the things between us. They are also very remorseful and promised that they will not hinder us anymore. If you don't want to be with me, I will also respect your wishes. You gave birth to the child alone abroad. You must have suffered a lot. Just let me take care of the child. Mauricio said it very seriously. He even thought about everything in the future. What if I have someone I like? Mauricio stiffened for a few seconds before his expression returned to normal. It doesn't matter. I will win you back again. I have to say that Mauricio is quite good at taking care of children. I don't need to worry at all. I usually just eat and drink at home. Occasionally, I upload videos of Mauricio taking care of the child online. But after a long time, even Grandpa couldn't stand it anymore. He secretly found me. Then he stammered and said, Carmelo, Enanon is already 5 months old. Don't you have any other thoughts? Thoughts? What thoughts? It's the matter between you and Hijing. Grandpa knows that we were wrong at the beginning. Now that you two have a child, why not be together? Grandpa and them don't argue anymore now. They are just competing for favor every day. They can't wait to hold an ananan and show off every day. Now, the matter between me and Mauricio is the top priority in their hearts. They can't wait to just to be together every day. But I have already discussed it with Mauricio. I prefer this way of getting along now. He doesn't force me. He said that when I want to be with him, we will be together. Grandpa had no choice but to go and discuss countermeasures with Grandpa Fu dejectedly. After Grandpa left, Mauricio came out of another room holding his daughter. Grandpa is urging you again? He looked at me and silently handed his daughter to me. I held my daughter, kissed her cheek, and nodded, yes. When I have time, I'll go persuade Grandpa. He sighed, remembering something. He secretly leaned over again. His eyes were dark and his voice was extremely low. Carmelo, do you want to come to my room tonight? I bought something you like. Something I like. Suddenly, I stopped soothing my daughter and silently met the man's gaze. Then I smiled knowingly. That night, I went to Mauricio's room. The door was closed all night. Extra story. In the 3rd year of marrying Mauricio, our daughter is 4 years old. He is on a business trip. I am handling work alone. Suddenly, our daughter, holding a notebook, stumbled in. Mom, Dad's thing. Look quickly. She held the notebook with difficulty and a milky voice asked me to look. Looking at the unfamiliar notebook, I was very curious because I had never seen such a notebook by Mauricio's side. I smiled and picked up my daughter and opened the notebook. What greeted my eyes was Mauricio's familiar handwriting. I paused. It was Mauricio's diary. I met Carmelo that Grandpa mentioned at the banquet. She is so small and very cute. She doesn't want to be sworn enemies with me. She wants to be friends with me. She even kissed me. How can I tell her that children can't kiss randomly? I went to the same school as her. I am so happy. Grandpa quarreled with Grandpa Joe again. But Carmelo and I secretly ran away. I became desk mates with Carmelo. I was admitted to the same middle school as Carmelo. Annoying. Many people like Carmelo. We are still in the same high school. I like Carmelo. I like Carmelo so much. But she ignores me. Carmelo slept with me and then ran away. She even blocked me. Grandpa said Carmelo is pregnant. But I can't find her. Where on earth are you? Carmelo returned to the country. She also brought a child. Is it mine? The child is mine. Our daughter is so cute. She must have suffered a lot. I bought what she likes the most. She should come to my room tonight. Right? She finally agreed to be my wife. The handwriting gradually changed from initially childish to later green and then to the final flamboyant style. As I read it, I couldn't help crying. This fool has been recording until now. Mom, why are you crying? Our daughter looked puzzled and reached out to wipe my tears. I smiled and silently closed the notebook, because Mom is very happy. Having you and Dad. Shall we call Dad? Yes. Our daughter replied in a milky voice. Later, I took a photo of that notebook and posted it on Weibo. It was named, Mr. Fu's Love Diary. Love Diary. Love Diary. Love Diary. Love Diary.